Good afternoon, all. In beginning my series on weird fantasy novels, I'm going to start with what's probably the weirdest one of all, and that's 1920's A Voyage to Arcturus, written by David Lindsey, who was a Scottish author, and it's very bizarre. It's very well regarded within the literary community, even for the time, although it didn't make a lot of money, and I think Lindsey was a bit disappointed in that. But J.R.R. Tolkien says that he read it with avidity. C.S. Lewis based his space trilogy somewhat on A Voyage to Arcturus. Clive Barker says he thinks it's a fantastic book, and so does Michael Moorcock, who liked its quote-unquote God-questioning aspects. It's a very strange adventure that I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who has not read it. I will let you know it is now in public domain because it's over 100 years old, and you can read it for free on the internet, and that's what I did. I used Internet Archive, but you can use any number of services. Just type in A Voyage to Arcturus, and you'll find a free link. It's a voyage that takes place starting with a seance in Scotland, and two of the guests are a character called Maskell, and that's kind of an interesting name. It's an anagram, obviously, of skull mask, which is interesting because his character has a lot to do about death. And the other character's name is Nightspore. They're kind of invited at the last minute to this seance. They experience a materialization, and then suddenly a third character, kind of an ugly dwarfish character called Crag, shows up, and he says to Maskell, he twists the neck of this apparition that's shown up, summoned by a spiritualist, and it gets this sort of weird rictus on its face, which Crag refers to as Crystal Man's grin. We don't know who Crystal Man is or what that means at the time, but he offers Maskell and Nightspore to the opportunity to go to a distant planet orbiting the star Arcturus called Tormance. That may be a combination of the words romance and torture, which I think is kind of interesting too. And they agree, and they're by using a very strange quote-unquote crystal torpedo that is propelled by these strange light rays called Arcturian back rays, which are rays that return to their origin source. They're going to be able to make this voyage of 37 light years in 19 hours. Crag tells them that's not realistic from a science viewpoint, but again, this is fantasy, not science fiction, so we can suspend our disbelief. Maskell ends up on this planet Tormance alone. The main sun, the white sun called Branchspell, is very, very hot, and he's in a desert of scarlet sand. He has to figure out where he is and where he's going and how to get there, how to avoid this hot sun, and also the light of the blue star, which is called all pain, which is a reference to a Buddhist statement, life is all pain. When Maskell looks at it, he actually feels pain and discomfort, physical discomfort, I should say. Kind of interesting. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to summarize the book, but I'm going to talk about some of its themes, which include, the nature of life, the nature of God, the nature of love, the nature of our existence, what existence is, and why we're here, if we have any purpose whatsoever, which is kind of questioned also. Some of the interesting things it brings up, some of the wonderful inventiveness of David Lindsey. He actually invents two primary colors, one called Ulfire, U-L-F-I-R-E, which he describes as, in comparison to red, blue, and yellow, as being wild and painful, and Jale, J-A-L-E, which he describes as dreamlike, voluptuous, and beautiful. So how can you picture them? They're completely beyond the human spectrum, but they exist. There's also a third color revealed later called Dolm, D-O-L-M, which is a combination of blue and Jale. And another character explains that there are 6 primary colors, actually, but 2 of them are the same, blue, and that the star Branchspell, the primary colors are the ones we're familiar with, red, blue, and yellow. But from Alpane, they are Ulfire, blue, and Jale. So blue is shared between the 2 different spectra, which I thought was an interesting idea on Lindsey's part. Very inventive. Maskell meets all these wild characters. Some of them are very good, like a character named Joywind and her husband Panawe, who he meets in the first chapters of the novel, live a very peaceful existence. Some of them are evil, like this character called Osiax, who basically forces him through organ that imposes her will on him, literally, to murder her husband. And then there's another wife of the person he murders named Ty Doman, who enforces her will on him, is going to actually take over his body and replace it, because she says she's tired of being a female. And that's one of the things that this talks about gender fluidity a lot. And again, remember, this is 1920, and they didn't talk about these things. One of the most interesting characters that Maskell encounters is a person called Lee Halfay. Lee Halfay is neither male nor female, but a third sex. And in that, he cannot refer to her as him or her. He refers to this person as I, A-E, and it says air self or air, it does not speak of him or her, which I thought was very interesting linguistically. And unfortunately, this character is quote unquote a Phane, P-H-A-E, and a very old form of being who has been around possibly for millions of years, but has some sort of moral ambiguities, doesn't really see things the same way everyone does, and predicts its heir's own death, and that death actually takes place despite Maskell trying to stop it. And this happens to a number of characters in the book. They predict that they're going to die, and then they do die, and the ways that they predict it, which kind of brings about the question of, is there such a thing as predestination? One of the interesting things I found about this is that someone asks him why he's here, and he's here to serve a god named quote-unquote Surtur, S-U-R-T-U-R, who's also known as Shaping on Torments, and also as Crystal Man. They're the same thing. And Surtur tells Maskell at one point, you're here to serve me. He says, well, what am I serving you for? And he says, you're here to steal Muspel light, M-U-S-P-E-L, light. That refers both to Surtur and to Norse mythology. In Norse mythology, there are 9 realms. Those realms are, briefly, Asgard, which is the home of the Aesir, who are gods like Odin and Balder and Loki and Thor. And Heimdall, and there are the Vanir, who live in Vanaheim, which is the home of gods like Freya, more earth-related gods. There's Jotunheim, which is the land of giants. There is Niflheim, a land of frost giants. There's Midgard, which is earth. There's Helheim, which is the underworld, and not hell as we describe it, but just an underworld ruled by the goddess Hel, H-E-L. And there's Alfheim, which is the world of elves. There's Svartalfheim, which is the land of dark elves. By dark, they mean evil, not dark-colored. And then there is Muspelheim. What's Muspel? Muspelheim is a land of fire, and it is also ruled by a fire giant named Surtur, S-U-R-T-R, who is supposed to start Ragnarok and destroy the world through Muspel fire at Ragnarok, when the world comes to an end. They've changed his name to S-U-R-T-U-R in this book, but he's basically the same character, and Muspel light or Muspel fire has the same property of being able to even destroy a god, and it's attempted to be used to destroy Crystal Man. We do not know at the end if that attempt is successful. There's kind of a couple of interesting transitions. Maskell apparently dies, but then he wakes up and finds out that he's really Nightspore. He and Nightspore are in essence the same being. But Nightspore can be controlled by Surtur, whereas Maskell could not. He was only controlled by Crystal Man, it's revealed. Some interesting observations about the 20th century, and, Maskell says that he came to Torments because he was tired of vulgarity. Also says that, the sense of adventure has been lost on Earth, and everything is, quote-unquote, corrupt, vulgar, and completed. So that's the way. That may have to do with Lindsey's experiences in World War I, which he found very upsetting, and I think cast upon this idea that maybe mankind is rather corrupt and not a good being, essentially, despite what religion teaches us. Some very interesting observations about religion and the world and our relationship to different people. I will say one thing: it's a very talky novel. If you don't like whole chapters where it's just dialogue between 2 or 3 different characters, you may not enjoy this. But I think it is really totally enjoyable, simply because it's so novel and so new. Even for 1920, it's remarkable that it deals with some of these sexual subjects, and the idea of ambiguity between male and female, and even areas where men hate women and women hate men, which I think was kind of a strange intersection, and very inventive use of creative ideas. I thought it's not a book that answers questions; it's a book that asks questions and asks you to ask questions, and I think that's important.